Now, the other parts that are being looked into, cancer is a big deal. And so the ability to supercharge our immune system cells using CRISPR is not that far off, and having our own immune cells destroy cancer cells. So you don't have to deal with the problems with cancer or with some of the treatments that are often worse than the cancer itself. And so if you think about, any TVs or movie or people that when they're going to the doctor and they're looking for treatment, they never say, oh, no, thank you. They're always like, what are the alternatives and possibilities? And so this potentially is one of the viable alternatives to help people. So potential for somatic cell editing and eradicating these monogenetic disorders and possibly cancers, I think they're not only ethical, but also humane. If we have the ability to alleviate suffering from these conditions, why wouldn't we?
Thank you, Professor Taylor. Professor Rollins, your thoughts?
Sure, thank you. I can see why proponents of DNA editing would argue that it's right to use such techniques to cure genetic disease. From their perspective, a person would present with a disease. The healthcare professional has a tool by which the disease could be removed. Therefore, patient autonomy and the principle of benevolence by which healthcare professionals operate would suggest that DNA editing to cure genetic disease is a good thing. However, before patients undergo any DNA editing procedure, they should be fully informed about any possible unintentional side effects the procedure may have on other genes. As already mentioned, scientists routinely overlook such side effects because they take place far away from the original site that was edited. Informed consent requires that a patient fully understand the risks of any procedure. It's difficult to understand how a patient could have informed consent about the risk involved with CRISPR when scientists themselves doing the research on CRISPR are themselves ignorant about the risks. Additionally, using DNA editing to cure genetic disorders easily reinforces some discriminatory biases that persist in our culture. For example, in trying to use such technology to cure conditions such as albinism or short stature, one implies that there is something wrong with being albino or short statured. The human tendency to label what is different as wrong, to label what is different as in need of being cured, was exemplified in America's eugenic movement, which took place early in the 20th century that resulted in gross injustices against underrepresented groups and minorities in the form of forced sterilizations. We simply cannot afford to continue making the mistakes that we've made in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rollins. So as you all heard, two different sides. I'd like to see what you think about this. So remember, this is specifically limited to, is it right to use DNA editing in humans to cure genetic diseases? And I'm going to relaunch the poll.
Are we allowed to ask clarifying questions?
There will be time for questions after we go through these first five, and you'll have a chance to actually pose them to Professor Taylor and Dustin and Professor Rollins.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now, and I'll share that with you. So as you can see, similar to last time, the con for this is still higher. But if you do notice, there's more people at least in favor of the idea that this could be helping to cure genetic diseases than there were about the last question, which is it safe? The next question I'd like to pose to our debaters. And for those of you who have never seen the movie Gattaca, It paints a future world where genetic editing in humans has led to a new form of social racism, where genetically purified children are given better jobs, pay, and held socially above those who are not. What do you say to those people who are worried human DNA editing could lead to this kind of world? And I think we'll start with Professor Rollins.
Thank you. I would say that history has repeatedly shown that such worries are completely justified. We live in a society that often struggles to acknowledge the existence of systemic forms of discrimination. There are currently no adequate safeguards in place to prevent discrimination in the event that DNA editing tools become widely available for consumer purchase. For example, individuals with power and wealth could use their power and wealth to give themselves, by means of DNA editing technology, the traits that would ensure that they and their offspring would always be powerful and wealthy. Individuals without power and wealth may not have equal access to such technology, and therefore would be disadvantaged not only in this generation, but in future generations as well. There are no safeguards in place to protect individuals who either cannot afford DNA editing technology or who might choose not to use it for personal or religious reasons. There's no safeguards to protect them from being labeled by society as genetically inferior. Once a person or group is thought to be inferior, it is an all too easy step for society to claim that the inferior person or group deserves to be at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. To conclude, people can stop worrying if DNA technology might result in genetic discrimination